Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman is going to present the Union Budget tomorrow. But what does it mean and why should you really be concerned? Well, the Union Budget is in a sense a financial statement of the Indian government. It details what the government has earned and spent previously and what it intends to earn or spend in the coming year. Now let's take a look at what the breakdown of how the government earns and spends a rupee has been. Now according to the Union Budget presented by the government in 2023, the government earns the majority of its money from borrowings and other liabilities, followed by GST and other indirect taxes, corporate tax and personal income tax. Now it spends 20% of its wallet reserve on interest payments, followed by states' share of taxes and duties, central sector schemes, centrally sponsored schemes, finance commissions and other transfers. But let's also take a look at how the funds were allocated to different ministries in the interim budget, which was presented by the finance minister in February of this year. The largest chunk of the funds went to defense, portraying the government's focus on building the sector further. It was followed by road transports and highways, railways, consumer and home affairs. But there's a huge wish list that you and I have from the newly elected government this year, don't we? We're all looking at tax reliefs, certain welfare schemes, PLI for manufacturing units, funds and initiatives for MSMEs, startups, as well as agriculture, which got an allocation of rupees 1.27 lakh crore rupees, which is substantially less from other major ministries. Well, let's dive in and see what the government might have in store for us. The first thing that really affects you and I is how we are taxed. The industry experts expect that there might be a change in the tax slab rates under the new tax regime. These tax consultants also believe that exemptions under the old tax regime are expected to increase, especially the limit for exemption under Section 80C and investments in NPS. But since the government wants to eventually be done away with the old tax regime, will the expectation to increase exemptions find their way to FM stable? Well, we'll know tomorrow. But if you're a corporate or a startup, is it possible that tomorrow might bring happy cheers for you? Well, it might. There's been a long-standing demand by the startups industry to do away with the angel tax. While it might not be completely done away with, the industry can see some relaxation in the rules and regulations under angel tax provisions. Now let's move on to some more industry expectations. The industry body of mutual funds, which is AMFI, shared what they expect from the government in the budget tomorrow. Let's take a quick look at the things that, if implemented, would affect you and I. Well, the number one is parity between debt funds and debentures. AMFI has requested that capital gains on redemption of debt-oriented mutual funds which are held for more than 3 years should be taxed at 10% without indexation, bringing them in line with how debentures are taxed. AMFI has also proposed that all SEBI-registered mutual funds should be allowed to launch pension-oriented mutual fund schemes, which is mutual fund-linked retirement scheme, with similar tax benefits as applicable to the national pension scheme. But if the proposal is considered, why would people bother to invest in NPS? Well, apart from this, the industry body has also proposed the creation of a new fund category, debt-linked savings schemes, similar to equity-linked savings schemes, which can offer the same ATC tax reduction benefits up to rupees 1.5 lakh, but with a debt fund. But if the government eventually really wants to be done with the old tax regime, will investment in any of these instruments offering exemption benefits even matter? Well, only time will tell. Well, even manufacturing industries has its eyes on increasing allocation towards production-linked incentives. Now, allocation under major PLI schemes has already grown significantly in financial year 2025. Large-scale electronics and IT hardware, automobiles and auto components, and pharma has dominated most of the allocation under the PLI scheme in the interim budget. Now, according to the budget preview shared by CareEdge, industry is looking at an increased allocation or inclusion of more labor-intensive sectors like textiles, leather, and footwear and toys under PLI. With the economy moving from being agricultural-heavy to services-heavy, focusing on manufacturing to become a superpower might just be the need of the hour. Let's also look at welfare schemes. Over the past couple of years, share of revenue expenditure in total expenditure has declined from pre-pandemic average of around 88%. The industry expects financial year 25 revenue expenditure to grow by 6.8% higher than the budgeted growth of 4.6%, resulting in around 750 billion rupees higher allocation compared to the interim budget estimate. But does it really matter to you? Well, it does. The government is expected to do higher allocation towards agriculture, welfare schemes, job creation and rural housing, all of which affects you if you are a citizen of the country. Major schemes or ministries that can see higher allocation include Manrega, PM Awas Yojana, PM Gram Sadak Yojana, PM Kisan Samman Nidhi, and schemes related to labor-intensive MSME sectors. Well, let's end this list with the things that economists are expecting. Let's look at fiscal deficit numbers. The government has been committed to fiscal consolidation and reduced the fiscal deficit for financial year 24 to 5.6% of GDP from 9.2% of GDP in financial year 2021. Now, Goldman Sachs in its budget review expects the government to stick to the announcement of fiscal consolidation target of 5.1% of GDP for financial year 25 and announce further consolidation to be below 4.5% of GDP by financial year 26. On the other hand, government has missed their divestment plans targets for 5 consecutive years. Government is likely to stick to financial year 25 target of miscellaneous capital receipts, which also includes divestments of rupees 500 billion. But achieving this target hinges on the government undertaking big-ticket divestments, which, given the past trends, seems unlikely. CareEdge estimates a total divestment potential of rupees 11.5 trillion, assuming Centre retains 51% stake. Well, the decision to divest will, however, depend on the market conditions and strategic nature of the firms. But before we end our wish list, let's also focus on how much of our wish list is actually likely or unlikely. Well, Goldman Sachs Global Investment Research shared a list. Let's have a look at that. Well, if we look at the rural sector, there are expectations like putting money towards agri-infra projects, which includes cold storage facilities, expansion of more efficient irrigation network, and also things like incentives to increase domestic production of edible oil, pulses, vegetables, and fruits. And all these things, according to Goldman's Global Investment Research, seems kind of likely. Let's also look at support for MSMEs, which includes expectations like the micro loan limit, which might be doubled to 2 million rupees, and also a reduce in compliance burden for small traders and MSMEs, which also seems likely according to this report. Let's also look at manufacturing, which has expectations like continued focus on manufacturing with emphasis on labor-intensive manufacturing through fiscal incentives and also commercial aircraft manufacturing. Now, according to the report, this seems likely as well. Let's also shed some light on housing welfare schemes. Now, housing for every poor family. Under the rural housing scheme, somewhere 2 million houses built since 2016, and there's also an expectation for slum redevelopment in major cities, reduce regulatory costs while enabling these automatic approvals, and also focus on clean drinking water for households in both rural and urban areas. Again, these are some of the expectations that seem likely to happen tomorrow. Let's also shed some light on services. There's an expectation to expand global capability centers, global technology centers, and global engineering centers, and also focus on tourism for job creation, which again seems likely to happen tomorrow. If we look at social security, there have been expectations like insurance for unorganized workers and get taxi, truck and three-wheeler drivers under insurance schemes, which again seems likely to happen. Let's also shed some light on infrastructure. Now, continued focus on infrastructure creation through more rail network and focus on east and northeast of India, and add another 5,000 plus kilometers of new rail tracks every year for the next few years. It seems likely, but fiscal allocation may shift off balance sheet if that happens. Lastly, let's also look at reforms. Progress on structural reforms like land and labor market reforms to create an enabling regulatory environment for manufacturing growth, and even market-linked pricing for farm produce. Well, this one seems kind of difficult to implement. Well, all that is just our wish list, but we'll only know tomorrow how much of that is fulfilled. So till then, let's wait and watch.